Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Erasmus Expeditions. We are here with episode 34 of the Help Action series here on the channel. This is a one-part topic discussion, one-part interview, one-part audience Q&A, where we take someone from the community and invite them on as a guest, and then we pick a specific topic to kind of discuss and get to know them a little bit better. I'm very happy to be discussing managing expectations this evening. I'm very excited. The Help Action series has gone wonderfully so far, and I'm really excited to welcome my guest tonight. Jordan, you son of a bitch, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. How about you?
Like I said, I'm great. The weekend is here, so it's only kind of looking up. I have a very busy gaming schedule kind of throughout the next week. So there's a lot to look forward to. Still a lot of work to get done, but also a lot to look forward to. So I'm excited.
It's good. Games are fun. Ton of fun.
Yeah. So thank you very much, first of all, for deciding to go ahead and come on and talk about this with me today. But before we get started, why don't you tell people kind of where they can find you? You can plug anything that you'd like to plug that you have going on or upcoming, and then we can kind of get this ball rolling.
Sure. So hi everyone. I'm at DND Jordan Lea. I'm a Twitch variety streamer. You can find me at twitch.tv/DNDJordanLea. I mainly play Dead by Daylight, but I also talk about how that can be related to Dungeons and Dragons because hi, I'm a nerd in both worlds because why not? I am also one half of, and she's here, one half of the classic brunch crew with the amazing Goblin Katie, where we play classic World of Warcraft, die a lot, and usually Chaos reigns because our community loves to play stream loot cards that make us do really interesting things or play interesting noises. So that's on Sunday mornings. I am also one of the co-founders of the Amphitheater, which is a production company that my best friends and I started because we love everything TTRPG based. So we just wrapped up Pawns of Prometheus, our campaign that has been going for about a year. We're taking a little bit of a break, and then we're going to play another campaign before we jump into season 2 of that. So it's just a ton of fun, and we do talk shows over there. I'm also partnered up with Mini Terrain Domain. So I'll be getting ready to get ready to help out with the Jaspers Game Week, which will be happening in the first week of May. So yeah, I jump around a lot. I have a problem. I like to do a lot of things.
That's not a problem. Not a problem at all. Keeping busy is a good thing.
That's true.
Having a lot of hobbies. I actually just had a conversation with my grandmother the other day, telling her that I can't wait until I can retire. She is still working, and she's like, "No, not me." She's like, "I want to work until I can't anymore." And I'm like, "That's because I have a lot of hobbies, so I know how to fill my time when I'm not at work." So yeah. Having hobbies is very, very good.
Especially in the last year and a half or so. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm telling you, it has saved my sanity. Being able to play online with people has saved some part of my sanity. Even though I'm an introverted person, there's a part of me that needs that kind of interaction, especially centered around gaming. So, yeah.
I totally get it. I'm an omnivert, so I'm usually fine with being in front, but I also like my me time. So, but again, playing games with my best friends and, getting into some shenanigans is always a fun time, on or offline.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of people they tell me that they don't believe that I'm a shy person if they came to know me through gaming and doing streaming and stuff. But I'm only this way if I feel comfortable. And if I'm not comfortable or if I don't know where I can step with my humor, because I have a very dirty sense of humor.
Same.
And it puts people off if they don't understand that I'm just kidding. And I try not to be that person with people that don't really know me and they don't know how to take what I'm saying. So it takes me a long time to warm up to a lot of people. But
Nope, I understand and I relate. So yes.
perfect. Then welcome. So you mentioned already, but let's go ahead and ask this question.
Sure.
Recently, you became an official part of the Mini Terrain domain team, which is
Mhm.
a huge and hearty congratulations are in order.
Thank you.
But talk to me a little bit about this. How did that come about?
Um, so
If you can talk about it.
no, it's totally fine. It's my journey in the TTRPG stream space has kind of been a bit all over the place as well. But I was originally involved with another streaming channel that did a lot of charity streams, and I saw that Jake, I was following him on Twitter, was posting about Jasper's Game Week, and so it's a cause that I'm really focus and care about. I've lost a few people in my life to suicide, so it's definitely a cause that kind of resonates with me. And my background is psychology, so I want to change that conversation as well. So I posted on his Twitter. I was like, well, if you need a mod or if you need any assistance, like I'm happy to like help out in any way, shape, or form. And then I was an admin on one of the admins on the streaming channel that I was on at the time. And so I talked to the group and we ended up getting involved in helping out with Jake, more so in like modding and just making sure there was people in chat for hype and doing all of that. And so we got involved in that kind of sense. And then our communication kept going. We started having Jake and Dwight and a couple of our charity stream games. And then just a friendship grew. So at the beginning of the year, the group that I was a part of, the stream and community ended up ending and kind of disbanding at that point. And so I kind of went off on my own and was spending some time figuring out what I wanted to do in this space. Now that I had a little bit more time to focus in on me and also building my community on Twitch, but I wanted to do stuff with TTRPGs too. So I was talking and then Jake reached out and was like, hey, do you want to do this? And I was like, are you sure you're talking to the right person? Sure. So the rest is kind of history from there. And I'm super excited to be helping out with Jaspers. And for the Monday night game, we're gonna be doing Candlekeep starting May 17th. Because of course we gotta play some D&D too. We gotta throw some games into all of that. But yeah, that's kind of the journey. It's a little all over the place, but it's the friends we made along the way, right?
Exactly. That's what it was the whole time. Friendship. But no, yeah, establishing a friendship with Jake is very easy. He's very easy to get along with. Yeah, I've had the pleasure of knowing him for a few years now. I would say probably going on about 4 years or so now. Through the Absolute Tabletop group is where we ended up meeting. And I've had the chance to meet him in person a couple of times because of the convention that they have out there every summer, with the exception of last summer,
year,
unfortunately, and this summer, which pisses me off so much. Not that that's their fault. That's just things, circumstances.
It'll just make it next year will be all the better because then it'll be that CR20 expectation of fun because 2-year build up, 2-year campaign.
Yeah. I've got a lot of hugs built up.
Yeah.
I need to release.
Now I need a comic strip of literally the campaign for Jake's hug.
Yep. And I think Dwight is supposed to be there next time too. And it'll be the first time I get to meet him in person. So I get to hug him as well. I'm excited. Yay. Hugs for everybody. Awesome. So we already have a question that has come in from Eladria. Hope I said that right.
Yes.
The question. Oh, perfect. Good. What are 3 unspoken expectations you find commonly at tables you sit down to?
So as a player, but also as a DM, one of the first things that usually comes to my mind is that the players expect to be railroaded. Oftentimes, this actually popped up in my off-stream campaign. I run on a couple Wednesday nights a month, and we've been going for about 2 years. But I remember this instance clear as day. They were exploring a live dungeon, and so they managed to kind of hide themselves in a room. and kidnapped the kind of henchman of the big bad in the dungeon, and they were interrogating him. And so they got a lot of really useful information and all of that. But I remember literally Bill, Philadelphia, who's over on the amphitheater, one of the co-founders, called timeout. And I was like, okay, like checking in. Did we cross the line? Did we cross the veil? Is everyone good? Everyone's good. Good. Okay. And he goes, are we supposed to kill this guy? And I was like, well, that's up to you. I mean, here are the facts. You know, he is the second in command. He could certainly assist you further along. But at the same time, he's the second in command, so he has no loyalty to you. What would Dob do? And whatever your decision is, that's going to be your decision. I'm not going to punish you. I think he was, and the expectation is, as DMs, we're going to punish our players for the choices that they make. And really, that's not the case. This is collaborative storytelling. Yes, there may be things that get missed, but I'm not going to be like vindictive and be like, all right, now Tiamat is now going to appear. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not fun. That's not conducive to the conversation, to the growth that's happening here at this table. I want you to feel the freedom to fully follow what your characters are doing. And that was a habit that took a while for them to break. But now it's no problem. They are going, I keep them close to the tracks, as actually Goblin Katie put it in a conversation I had with her. I keep them close to the tracks, but I never put them on the tracks. I will sometimes give them a nudge if I feel like they're really flailing about a little bit, but I will never be like, hi, strap in, here we go. Like, that's it. So I think that's definitely one of the unspoken expectations that pops up. The idea that, because I think it's still so new about safety tools, the idea about safety tools being used. And I think that's a really important conversation as someone that has had those safety lines kind of crossed in a campaign before. The idea that, when I brought it to the table and put that forward, a lot of them were really shocked and didn't know that that was going to be a thing. So that was kind of a conversation I had, as well as the character growth. I think the expectation is that they're going to just follow the main plot, that they're not going to actually have like their own arcs or have their kind of space to build their characters. What I actually did for my group, the Wednesday night group, because they just finished the second like big arc that they've had. They've started at level 7. They're up to about 11 or 12 now. So they've had some growth. They've seen the world. And I had them do a little questionnaire, just having them reflect on homework. Okay, here are your expectations of everything your character wanted at the start of this campaign. What are your what does your character want now? Trying to build that cohesive kind of story to build upon as a foundation. The whole managing the campaign expectations doesn't start and stop with safety tools, and that's session 0. It is an ongoing conversation that goes throughout the entire campaign, as well as even at the end with some kind of epilogue, what that expectation is. So I feel like oftentimes, though, players don't think that their stories will either necessarily matter or what they say will matter. One of my players, Bill, mentioned that in passing that he didn't like a specific light, because he's experiencing with his character, he's kind of going through some PTSD. So I latched onto that and used that later on, and he thought that I had disregarded what he had said. No, I latched onto, I'm running with it. You mentioned this, I'm going to go with it. So I think it's that, I know I threw like 4, but I think that expectation of, what the players are putting in isn't necessarily something that DM is going to use, because they're going to stick to whatever they have on their plate. Sorry, that was long-winded.
No, that's exactly what we're here for. And I would agree, I think, with a lot of what you've said. I do tend to run a little bit more of a railroad, but my players are forging almost every single railroad tie. Exactly. While I'm moving, and what they're doing, I'm taking and putting it out in front of us and trying to incorporate it with what I'm also trying to have for the story arc. So I have a direction in mind, and they're giving me the means to kind of get in that direction. Kind of the context, if you will, of how we're going to get there and what it means when we finally arrive. And I love players who come to the table and are willing to give that kind of input, who are willing to take that kind of agency and also extend that level of trust in me as a game master, to take what they're giving me and fold it into the story that we're telling. And as far as punishing players for their decisions, I would have to disagree, though, because I punish my players for every decision they make, but I do so with their backstory.
Yes. That's different,
always,
though.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is different, though.
Yeah. It's not about me getting at you because I'm being vindictive. It's about, you remember that person that you mentioned a long time ago? Well, I needed somebody to put in danger. So guess what?
Oh, yeah.
Here we are.
And I think that's different than, okay, well, you didn't go this way. So, okay, now Asmodeus has a ring of wishes. Good luck.
Yeah,
no.
No. That player versus, or that DM versus player bullshit doesn't fly.
No.
I don't get it. I don't understand it, and I'm not gonna.
This is not PvP. This is not. It's not.
I am their biggest cheerleader, always and forever.
Same. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's roll into this first talking point that I have.
Sure.
I know that people who watch the Help Action series are very likely tired of hearing me beat this drum over and over again, but I have a method that I use called the COPE list. And COPE stands for Commonalities of Player Expectations. It helps to establish player-generated pillars for the scope of a campaign. And I have found that, for me at least, it gives me a veritable well that I can continually draw from for ideas for encounters and just general direction and guidance whenever I need it, and the experiences that I kind of know that the player is looking for. And I was wondering, do you have any kind of specific tools in general that you use for managing the expectations of your players?
So I actually have a binder for each of my players, with what they have given me and notes that I take during the session. Because for me, kind of having something that I can refer back to, because we don't play every week. We'll sometimes play once a month or once every 2 months because high scheduling is TMI. So having something to kind of look back on is a great assistance. I usually check in with my players, even if we're not playing, once a week, just to kind of see where their heads are at in terms of, what the next session is going to look like, or what their ideas of what they want. We do a debrief session at the end of our session too. We'll stay online for like another 30 minutes to a half hour, or I'm sorry, half hour to an hour, just talking about what went well with the session tonight, what could be fixed or made better. What would they like to see more of? What would they like to see less of? That was also on the sheet that I just had them do too, just because towards the end I saw that they really wanted more puzzles. So I started throwing more puzzles at them, and then they quickly realized, I don't want puzzles. Can you please get these as far away from me as possible? So quickly started taking those out. But again, kind of having that open line of communication. We have a Discord channel where we'll talk once a week, even if it's just, pictures of our cats and dogs. So just that open line of communication through there. And for me, I when I set the campaign, it was a one shot that turned into a campaign. So the idea that I put forth, then I got feedback of what they wanted. Okay, they wanted something that was a little bit more lore heavy, that was not going to be combat super heavy. Yes, there was going to be combat, but they wanted it to be meaningful. They wanted to focus more on the RP and building a cohesive story. They wanted something too, because everyone in the group is a DM. So I have the extra task of my world is Homebrew, every monster in my world is homebrew. So they don't know what's coming at them. And that was something that they really enjoyed. So they're like, not that we would metagame, but we don't know what this thing is. But I think, so I don't have necessarily those pillars, but I have those almost rivers of communication of that expectation of what they want. And their expectations have changed over the 2 years too. So it's been cool to kind of see their growth as players and where they've been going.
Yeah, I've said it a lot here on the show, but communication is probably the strongest tool that anybody can have. And that goes beyond gaming. Like in life in general, any relationship that you have, that you cultivate with someone, the fundamental thing that you need to establish is your level of communication. If you want a healthy relationship, you have to have a healthy level of communication. And that involves being honest with your communication and usually trying to be succinct in your communication.
Yeah. I relate to that. One of the things that I do too, just because, life has been difficult, but even before this last year and a half, it's been difficult. So I usually check in with my players a week before we're about to game, just checking in to make sure everyone's still good. One, on scheduling, but two, in terms of mental health. Again, we talk once a week, but then I'm like, okay, DM hat on. Are we good to go? How's everyone feeling? And if I know that we're going to be focused on potentially a heavier topic, and I hear even like see it on Twitter in passing, or, if someone has mentioned it within the group that they're kind of having a rougher week, I might take the focus off of that character a little bit. If I was planning like the next episode was going to be their main arc, and here's your backstory coming to bite you in the butt. Okay, we'll do some lighthearted stuff. We'll have a shopping episode, which normally I hate shopping episodes, but oh my God, I had the best shopping episode and it was hilarious. So that worked out. But I think that I agree with you. Communication is so key, especially when you are managing expectations, but also continuing the idea of this game. Your friends, this is a collaborative storytelling experience. If someone's unhappy or they're not feeling like their voice is necessarily being heard, that is the perfect way to, whether it be one-on-one or with a group, find a way to push that person forward. That's how I've DMing for a group of DMs has been amazing, because everybody knows to spotlight, to push someone else forward, to step back. So yeah, it's communication. I agree, is like the lifeblood of any campaign.
I agree. And if you have an established method of communication, an established healthy relationship of communication, then any problem that arises can be dealt with usually very quickly and in a positive way, that doesn't end up impacting anybody long term.
Exactly.
It doesn't ruin and fester the relationship itself furthermore. Yeah. So communicate. So one of the things that you kind of touched on a little bit, and I'm going to dive into it deeper here.
Sure.
We've gone over some points about how to manage expectations in the beginning of a campaign. But as you mentioned, some campaigns can run over the course of months or possibly even years. So in that time, players' expectations, people's tastes and interests can shift, possibly even profoundly so. So how do you manage the expectations through these changes as a game and its story kind of develop over time?
Yeah. Very good question. For me, again, it goes back to communication, but what we typically do in my Wednesday night group, and we've kind of adapted it, honestly, because half of the people in the Wednesday night group are at the amphitheater. So what we've established is we'll finish a season or an arc, and then I will get a break as a DM for a couple of weeks. And then this is the time for, if we want to do Star Wars or Honey Heist, or do something different for a couple of weeks while I get a little bit of time to kind of prepare for what's happening next, as well as
kind of like I get a palate cleanser.
Yeah, get a little bit of a palate cleanser. I get to play and not have to worry about, trying to, keep everyone from not dying or whatever it might be. So it's a nice little break because then I can jump in and not worry about running absolutely everything for a moment. It's a nice palate cleanser. But from that too, they learn and get ideas of what they're going to bring back into the campaign. They get ideas of what their backup character might be if something were to happen. So it's kind of allowed for that to kind of occur. And we do that on the Amphitheater. That's what we're currently doing. Right now, Duval is doing Olabar's Dream. His character got killed at the end of the season. So now we're exploring his dream. And then we're going to jump into a honey heist by me. And then Smitty's running something. And then Bill's, I think, doing a Star Wars thing. I don't know. It's a nice little break. But it's nice too. I'll check in with my players too and be like, hey, do you want to do the campaign tonight? Or do we want to do a one shot? Is like, is everyone feeling like they have the mental capacity? Because especially with my campaign, things are a little on the darker end. We do have lighthearted moments, but it's kind of like with Dawnbringers, they have that darker kind of themes and mindset as well. And that may not be the week or the day to do it. So we'll play Among Us, or we'll literally play a one shot, and it'll just be a kind of goof off session. But again, goes back to the communication and touching base with everyone to see how everyone's doing. I think the most interesting thing, and I brought it up earlier, was the questionnaire thing that I did. It wasn't like 20 questions long. It was 5 questions, and it was just a resource for them to use. Because they are starting to have a little bit more downtime. They're not going to have, since they're level 11, 11, 12, they're not going to be attacked by thieves every 5 seconds. They're, a little bit more capable in handling themselves. So they're not just adventurers, because I think that's a common expectation in campaigns, that you're just going to be dungeon delving and adventuring all the time. Sure, but that's not really realistic in terms of that. These characters have hobbies. These characters that you're playing have dreams. They have nightmares. They have fears. They have things that they want to explore. So to kind of create that kind of duality between not only real life, but also what you're playing, I think it's really important to see that. And the questionnaire was helpful for me, because for a lot of them, their goals that they had in mind have changed because the world got a lot bigger and the problems in it got a lot more complicated.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of doing questionnaires. Playing other systems, kind of going back to that, is I think a very, very good idea, because there's all these little tiny subsystems that other game systems use, that you can, if you like them and you like the way they function, you can take them and port them into other games like Dungeons and Dragons. And Dread is like a horror RPG that you use a Jenga tower whenever you play. And the book is rife with these very directed questions, these pointed questions. Who was the last person you killed? Why can you never go home again? Just these very thought-provoking questions that most of the time when you're developing a character, there's no reason to dive into that much specificity. But if you're given a directed question, it prompts a line of thinking for your character that you wouldn't have otherwise gone into. Exactly. And it gives you a broad foundation for how they're going to respond in almost any situation. You get a good feel for the kind of character that they are, what matters to them, what they fear.
Yeah.
And so I like drafting those up for a long running campaign. I usually do 10 questions per character.
Yeah.
But also as a dungeon master, I can use those pointed questions to plant the seeds for things that I want to use in the campaign later. Why is this trinket that you carry so important to you? Give me the name of an NPC who betrayed you at some point. Things like that. I'm a big fan of doing those kinds of things. Tagging onto the question that we were talking about managing expectations kind of as a campaign grows. Sometimes a player has to leave a campaign.
Yes.
for one reason or another. And sometimes another player might join an ongoing campaign.
Yep.
How do you manage the expectations of a new player who joins a campaign that's already in progress?
This happened recently, actually. So I had one player leave. I tend to run smaller groups. So my groups usually range from 4 to maybe 5 folks. For me, it's just more it's easier for me to kind of focus on, because then there's more story elements that I can kind of put in place and not feel like I'm rushing through. But I had Ryan, who was had been in the campaign for well over a year and a half. And he moved. And so he moved literally like around the world. So it became, unfortunately, with time zones, absolutely impossible to play. Yeah, I know, time zones. So he wanted to, build it so he could eventually come back. So they finished up an arc, and we had a way for him to kind of exit. And so there is the possibility he's roaming around the world on a boat. They might run into him. They may not. But I ended up adding not just 1, but 2 players because, again, scheduling, and I could see the dynamic of the group shifted. So I was like, okay, I need to kind of create a little bit more balance. And I actually have another player that's going to be joining the group soon once I get some more information to the person. But I met with both of them beforehand, talked to them about it, explained what the campaign idea was. I didn't give them all of the major, like, oh, this is what the big bad is. No. But I gave them just enough to kind of get them intrigued. Then they started asking me questions about the world. And so I was like, okay, so it's kind of War of the Roses based, but also there's an aspect of like Atlantis inspired. So there's elements of that, getting into that kind of detail, seeing what kind of clicks with them. And then I have had on several occasions, they will actually build a town and I will build it with them, which I think helps kind of give them cause to care about what's going on with with the world. I'm like, okay, you want a tower that has rainbows and shoots glitter out twice a day. Okay, we'll make it happen. So having that kind of conversation and then trying to find a way that's not, you meet in a tavern, because for me, that's very much a cliche. Yes, it works, but I like to avoid the cliches. So I had it that one of my players that joined up, he was actually, he really wanted to do an investigative type. So he was investigating a scene that a missing child was returned. And it was the first missing child that had been returned in I would say probably about 2 years. So he had taken a special interest in his case because when he was young, his best friend went missing. So he was there interviewing, and then the campaign, which was 2 people, kind of came over too because they were also investigating. And so then they started collaborating in that sense. And then I added the other player in. Literally, he was strolling about town as they were fighting the big bad for the arc. They were chasing him down. And so this other player jumped in, and other character jumped in to kind of throw the assist. And they were able to kind of come together in that sense. And so the group honestly instantly bonded because, again, that expectation of, okay, we got to sit through awkward tavern conversation and the weather, like talking about that. Instead,
I have my brooding backstory.
Yes.
I'll never trust you. No, I didn't trust you first.
Yep. Oh, and there was definitely levels of distrust between them, which was great because they didn't know, and they were all coming from different cultures and different places and stuff like that. So there was definitely a level of distrust, but then they quickly grew to kind of like each other, which is great because one of the players that I added to the campaign, I'm trying to be very careful because I think he's lingering in chat. has some information for one of the other characters' backstory stuff. So I tried to not tie it directly because then they're not individual stories. But I did try to find a link that would maybe offer up a little bit of assistance when it came to that. But honestly, the group clicked right away in this kind of impromptu way of meeting each other up.
Yeah, I don't think there's a faster way to form group cohesion than threatening them. Showing them that there is a common enemy and giving them reason to all feel like they need to work together in order to overcome this adversity. That's the fastest way to form a bond that I've found.
Which quickly turned into a shopping episode and them trying on capes. So that was a whole thing.
Excellent. All right. We have a question again from the audience. This is from Goblin Katie. Goblin. And she asks, what is an expectation that you would love to see eradicated from gaming in general?
It's bad that I want to say that girls game. The expectation that girls don't game. Right. Can we eradicate that?
That'd be a good place to start.
It would be a good place to start. Expectation you would love to see eradicated from gaming in general. I think the expectation that if you're running like a module or even a one-shot that you plan, that you have to follow everything to the T. I think there's a lot of pressure for DMs if they're running something like Waterdeep Dragon Heist or Curse of Strahd or something to that effect, that they have to follow everything to the letter because it's from the module. I don't think that's the case. I think the module, for me, I do think the modules are great. I think they're more of a guideline to kind of help you build that base story. I don't think it makes sense to follow everything to the T in terms of go to this mission and go to this mission. To me, it makes more sense of, okay, yes, we'll go through the module, but we're going to go through it at our own pace. D4 does a great job of that, honestly. So does Dawnbringers of, taking aspects of a module that Jake uses to then formulate into his own kind of homebrew. Or D4, they finished up Waterdeep Dragon Heist, but it's a campaign that is also very homebrewed too. So they're not going from mission to mission. There is exploration. It feels actually like one of the novels that you're reading and exploring in that sense. And it makes it a lot more real and easy to kind of adjust. I think for especially beginner DMs, the expectation that they have to follow the modules to the lever, or they have to do Minds of Phandelver. I think that honestly, that's a big burden for DMs to do, because it's even more heavy lifting because you're trying to stay true to that module to the point that you're going to sacrifice other aspects of what could be a really great campaign, such as character stories or character moments, because you're staying so true to that. And there's that expectation of it. There's nothing wrong with homebrewing. You can go off book. There's a whole world out there.
Yeah, I've never run modules before. I have a few of them on my shelf, and they're great for kind of shopping, if you will, like going in and picking pieces that I like and using them. But I've always preferred to craft my own story. I don't know why, because it's a lot more work, but
it's a story you're happier with, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot more rewarding for me, because first and foremost, I'm a storyteller. A lot of the other things, the other hats that you have to wear as a game master, I am first a storyteller. So being able to do that through gaming has been really, really rewarding. So I definitely prefer that. But as far as expectations that I would love to see eradicated from gaming is the bullshit about there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. I have met so many different people who game and who game for different reasons and who bring different things to the table and want to walk away from the table with different expectations. And all of it is valid. It's all okay. I mean, unless you're like wounding each other or whatever, maybe that's a little much. But yeah, I mean, as long as you're not being a dick, then you're not doing it wrong. And if it's fun and it's fun for everybody at the table, then press on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who cares?
I think the other expectation I would love to, ideally, when you start a campaign or you start a one shot, you would love your players to have a backstory. But from what I've found too, and this happened actually with Bill, he didn't build his backstory until I want to say halfway through the first arc because he was still figuring out who his character was. So I think that expectation of walking into the first session and knowing exactly who you are. No. Think about like your session 1, you may have an accent in mind. You may decide 5 sessions later, nah. I think the expectation that you are going to walk into the session and know exactly who this person is. I think it's perfectly fine. I ended up working with Bill on his backstory. I was giving him, he was one that he wanted me to give him a town. So I gave him a description of a town and then some folks that were in the town. Then he built the backstory of how he got there and all of that. So I think that expectation of you have to have this character 100% figured out. No. No, build it with your DM if you're struggling. For one, you don't have to do it. It doesn't have to be a 5-page paper. It could be something as simple as a paragraph, but as long as that paragraph has what you need in terms of your bases, okay, we can build upon that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think it's a folly in the same vein that a DM preparing 100% of their campaign, their story, and bringing that to the table without room for deciding things in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a mistake for the same reason. As a player, if you leave room for there to be organic development throughout the story, you're going to find ways that you can connect to the story and what's going on in the world. And that's only going to increase your level of player investment,
Mm-hmm.
which then feeds the dragon of everybody else's investment.
Exactly.
And in the end, whenever you walk away, that's going to be so much more of a rewarding experience because everybody bought in.
Exactly.
And if you can find places for you, if you leave those openings so that you can develop those connections when they arise,
Mm-hmm.
somebody's introducing, the DM is introducing a sect of a dark cult that's been developed in this town and they've been operating, and you're like, oh, wait a second. I had some dark, mysterious group in my backstory that I didn't fully flesh out. Could it be the same group? And, what DM in the right mind is going to say no?
No.
I mean,
No correlation.
yeah, exactly. They're going to jump on that and
Mm-hmm.
set that hook really deep. And when that hook is set deep, like you're reeled in. And
Yeah.
if you're reeled in, you're going to be paying more attention, and you're going to be in the moment more, which is really what we're all chasing
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day. So,
100%.
cool. All right.
Thank you,
So I
Goblin
have,
Katie.
yeah, that was a great question. One of the other things that I like to ask all of my guests who come on is, when and how did you find gaming? How did you get into this hobby?
So video games pretty early on. Games in general, like board games, pretty early on. We used to have Saturday night game night in my family when we were younger. And then every time we went to my grandparents, the many hours of Uno, Old Maid, Yahtzee, Monopoly, which usually ended up with somebody breaking a table. So, all of that. But I started video gaming in high school just because for me it was like the one time I could just relax. I was going to a school about an hour away, so getting up very early and then coming home very late on top of sports. I was also working in high school, the jobs, doing all that stuff. So having the video games to kind of just take a break and just hang out with my friends online. I can't travel up an hour today. Okay, we'll play online. We'll play some Lord of the Rings. and try and survive that, or Gears of War or whatever, or World of Warcraft was my go-to game for a long time as well. So jumped into that. I joined tabletop games pretty late. I didn't join into them probably right around college. My boyfriend at the time was a DM running a campaign, so he was usually running stuff while I was doing homework. But I thought what he was running was really cool. So I unfortunately was just too busy. I didn't get into it honestly until my senior year. And then I joined a group that did not want a girl at the table. And they let it be known, and I left the TTRPG space for a bit. But then one of my best friends lives up in Canada, and her boyfriend, now husband, I hadn't met him yet. And I was like, all right, well, I need to like check this guy out, make sure he's good to go. Like, he's dating one of my best friends. So I started talking to him, and we bonded over watching Critical Role and talking about D&D. And so I started asking more questions, and then just jumped into a game. And that's how I haven't looked back since.
That's awesome. Yeah. So yeah, that sounds like it was only probably within the last few years here.
Yeah, I would say minus like the hiatus, probably about 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. Well, again, on behalf of those other asshats, I apologize that you had to go through that horrifying experience. And again, like we talked about before, like I can't even believe that that there are still these people out here that are playing this game and thinking this way. It's just, it hurts my soul.
Well, but I will always be breaking down those gates. So yeah, I'm not going to let that stop me.
Good. I'm glad you didn't. I'm very glad that you didn't. Awesome. Yeah, that's one of those questions I love asking all of my guests, because everybody has such a varied answer. And it's always so fascinating to find how they manage to find and land in this strange little niche. But it also is really interesting because I have found that it also informs a lot of what their expectations are, you know, what they're wanting out of the game. You know, some people were taught to play by their parents, and they're kind of forever chasing that kind of same relationship that they developed with their parents that was beyond just the, you know, mother and daughter, or father and son, or what have you. That kind of friendship again. Or, you know, people who just accidentally found it and said, hey, this is kind of cool. It's really interesting how that changes people's expectations of the hobby. I've always found it very, very fascinating.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's been an interesting conversation to have, and I apologize for interjecting.
No, please go ahead.
Interesting conversation to have with my parents, especially the last couple of years, is I'm doing things more online. You know, yeah, I'm talking about Dungeons and Dragons and doing stuff with tabletop games, and they're like, "That's a thing? Like, that's a thing? Yeah, it's like you know, there's like, okay." Like, it's very like foreign concept to them. Right. You know, like I get very excited, like I'm getting on here to talk about TTRPGs. Oh, I'm going to talk about like TTRPGs tonight for, you know, and hang out with some friends, and we're going to talk. Okay. Like, it just set expectations of like not realizing like it is actually a huge deal. Because I think, especially now more than ever, this is, you know, a time where a lot of people are relying on technology. But I find more than ever, I'm watching less TV. I'm playing more games. I'm still, you know, paying attention to the news and what's going on. But I'm not impressed by a lot of TV anymore. I'm not impressed by a lot of like movies anymore, because I want to be playing. I want to be exploring that and going through it myself. I want to be experiencing it in my own way. You know, or to talk to my parents about, yeah, people make careers out and they're doing production and and like, really? So it's just it's so interesting to me. I don't understand it, but at the same time, it's like, oh, but you're shutting yourself off from such an amazing world and experience. Like, I think you would really like it. Like, I see my dad playing Valheim. I'm like, it's like that, but you're actually playing. Come on. Like, but he's like, no, I'm just gonna click. Just, I don't understand, but yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not a hobby for everyone.
No.
I have met people who I could definitely tell it's not the right thing for you to try.
Mhm.
And it's not like a gatekeeping thing. It's literally just I don't think you'd have a good time like doing this because I know how long I have to sit, how much I have to pay attention, and for
Mhm.
some people that's a really, really daunting task to sit down for 4 hours at the minimum, usually,
Yeah.
and just imagine. There's a lot of people who that sounds like hell, and my mother is one of them, which is strange because that's not really her personality. But I do a lot of building terrain and painting miniatures and stuff for my home group, and she will come over and she'll kind of come out here and look at my room and stuff. And she's like, I don't understand any of this, but I'm glad that it makes you happy.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fine, Mom. Thank you.
I think if we can go back to and link this, but I think this is actually a great way to bring it back to the expectation that, you have to be in a 4-hour session. One of my friends, and I deal with chronic pain, so I can handle 4-hour sessions, but anything longer than 5 hours, I need to go lay down. It's starting to hurt a little bit. But one of my friends wanted to get into Dungeons and Dragons, and so I remember she messaged me. It was it was New Year's. She was at a party, pre-COVID. And so they're like, oh yeah, we're going to play Dungeons and Dragons. And they started playing at 11 o'clock. They made characters. And then we're going to go through a 4-hour one shot. And I was just like, okay, what I would have done is I would have probably made it an hour to 2 hours. We're going to just do D20s. And you know what? We're going to just roll some base things. We're not even going to use the full character sheet. We're just going to use the basic thing. I'm going to, what I normally don't do, but I'm going to immediately remove the more difficult classes. We're going to go with some basic ones that will make it easy. And we're just going to go with that. I did that for a group a couple years ago, and it turned out to be a Christmas themed surviving the naughty list. And they were trying to get their name off of the naughty list, and they ended up fighting Krampus. So and that we did that in an hour and a half, 2 hours. It was not a long time. There was not a lot of time spent explaining rules and going through all of that. I just wanted them to get an idea of what the game could be like and bring it down to its most basic form. You don't have to have the player's handbook memorized. You don't have to have the DMG memorized. I think I've read like 5 pages from the DMG, honestly. So I have a backup DM who advises me about different rules, but then I'll make the ruling on it. But yeah, so I think that brings it back to what we were trying to talk about too. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And in those kinds of scenarios, for me, that's when D&D is not the answer. That's when I turn to a one-page RPG or something else that we're going to play, and it's 11 o'clock. Okay, but we're not going to spend an hour making characters. Let's do something fast and dirty. Let's get this going, and we can just focus on playing, like you said.
Yep.
Especially because by 11 o'clock for a New Year's party, most of my group wouldn't be sober enough to start doing math. So we're going to keep it very simple.
Oh yeah, no, that's what we did.
Yep, absolutely.
I've had some drinks, so we're going to keep this as simple as possible. Okay, so I don't have to worry about a lot of math.
Exactly. All right. We have another question from Aladria. And what is a homebrew rule you've encountered that you wish you'd thought of first?
Okay, so this one I forgot where exactly I grabbed it. I think honestly CR, but I love the idea of healing yourself is a bonus action, healing another person is an action. Makes sense. Or sometimes I've done this too recently. I'll have them do a skill check to see how quickly they can feed the health potion and then maybe do something. I'll have them do like a quick action. If there's someone that maybe has a little bit more of a medicine or nature-based background, then maybe they have a little bit more skill of, okay, I can heal you quickly and then maybe do something else. I think that works for the bigger kind of games. where you have a larger group that, especially if it's the combat, which can take forever, no matter what the group is. I think that kind of helps versus then having them wait an entire 10 minutes for their turn to come around again to try and do that. And that way too, they can kind of set themselves up. So I've had them do skill checks, and I'll have them be like, okay, what's your like mini action, which will be like, okay, it's basically them readying in case something moves into that area. So they'll have that kind of circumstance. But I like the healing at yourself is bonus, healing others is an action to do. It speeds it up in terms of that.
Absolutely. And 5th edition isn't built around a healing economy for mid-combat anyways. Most of the healing is so minimal and small that trying to do it with your action is almost always a suboptimal choice, unless they're dying. Then yes, absolutely,
yes.
Stabilize them. But yeah, I would have to agree. I really like that Jacob uses in his games where quaffing a potion is always a bonus action. So it's on your belt, you just reach down, knock the cork off and slug it back, and then you can still have most of your turn. One of the things that I stole, and I don't know if it counts as a homebrew rule, but typically I run 5th edition, and I completely and totally stole skill challenges and minions from 4th edition.
Fair.
And I think they fit with 5th edition without any adjustment whatsoever. So those are definitely homebrew rules that I use.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What else?
I think the switching. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I let inspiration stack. Inspiration having yes or no, and it only granting advantage is a horrible missed opportunity, in my opinion, in the game system, because advantage is not a big deal. Like, if you're using flanking, I literally get that from having somebody standing next to me. Like, having that as a reward, and you can just have one, so you have to like hold it if it's special. It's dumb. So yeah.
Yep. I do the same for mine as well. They can have multiple inspirations. And then it doesn't just grant them advantage. They can also then apply that. It's almost like an extra D4, D6 in terms of damage. Because I think that is good as well. I know Jacob does this too and this is a homebrew rule, they will max crit the damage. So, because it sucks if you roll and then it's like a bunch of ones.
Yeah.
So I do like Jacob does that. I know he got it from elsewhere. I'm not sure exactly where he got it. Hi, Duval. He's my big bro. But I do love that idea because it just makes, like, especially when you're having those epic level fights, it just feels and hits so much harder. And then to see the reaction from everybody in the game, like getting up from their tables, like you think they just won the Super Bowl because they are so impressed by all of that, I think is just adds to it. You want that level of satisfaction versus like, oh, I rolled couple ones, so 5.
Yep. Yeah. The homebrew rule that I use for criticals is it's your full dice damage plus all of your modifiers, and then roll your dice a second time and add your modifiers a second time. Ooh. So it's really big, especially if like a rogue hits, because that's all their sneak attack damage as well.
Yeah.
But like in my games, I don't want combat to drag on forever anyways. And if I can hang the end of the combat on a massive hit that somebody does, then excellent. I want epic moments in my combats. I want things for the players to remember for years afterwards. And like you said, if you get this, you roll the 20 and it's a clutch moment, everybody's excited, and then you get your dice and you roll them and you're like, oh, that's less damage than I did with my dagger,
Yeah. It's right. Like, okay, I'm poking it. Like, okay.
It's a critical hit.
Yeah, it's a toothpick hit. Like, that's what it is.
Exactly. Excellent. Yeah. So yeah, I'm all for homebrewing. You just need to make sure that your players understand that it's a thing in the beginning.
Yeah.
Or if you're bringing it in midstream, talk it over with them first to make sure everybody's okay.
Yeah.
Communication. Again.
Communication.
Awesome. Okay. Another question I have.
Sure.
Another thing that we have mentioned a lot here on the channel are session zeros and how useful they are for campaigns. You've mentioned that you use them, but specifically, what are your thoughts on the importance of having a session zero?
I think they are the building block of your campaign. It's the building block of not only a campaign, though, but also your communication. It is a way for all of you to meet. More often than not with these campaigns, you're playing with people that do not know each other. So having a session zero to kind of build that trust so you can start having a cohesive party, that takes time. So kind of coming up with that session zero to, again, help with expectations. If someone's expecting to be joining a campaign that's Star Wars and you're actually playing something that's World of Warcraft, that's going to be a vastly different expectation. But okay, we need to work on that. Or maybe this is not the campaign for you, but I have something in mind that in the next few months I'm thinking about running, and we can go from there. But it builds that level of trust. It builds also, I think, lines of communication in terms of that, because everyone will be comfortable working together. Maybe that'll bring up the opportunity for folks to pair up and build backstories together. But also the importance of safety tools. Because for me, those are, they are every adventurer and every DM's healing potion, escape route. They are so important to have, and those are going to also be something that will change over the course of the campaign as you explore these different topics. Because more often than not, you or the players are going to stumble upon something and not maybe realize that that was a trigger. So to kind of have it so you have a line of communication in place, and a way that is not going to make the person feel uncomfortable for speaking up. And making your players feel that they are supported in that sense of, okay, yes, speak up. All right, we're not going to do this. Okay. So we're going to retcon it back here and we're going to fade. We're not even going to go and explore that. We are having you go down the left hallway or whatever it is. But it also helps too with player buy-in and character buy-in. You're helping these players in your session zero. You may not even be building them, the characters there at the table with them, but you're going to be explaining what the world is. You're going to be explaining some of the history of what the world is, or what your ideas are. What I typically do is I have a session zero with the whole group where it's a bit of an icebreaker, and then I'll have one-on-one sessions with everybody. So we'll talk about, at that point, the safety tools that they've turned in. I'll talk about if they have questions about specific areas. I provide a map. And if they want to know about a specific area because they think that their character may be coming from that area, we'll go a little bit more in depth. And then I'll talk to them about, what kind of, I try to have them write the backstories first before the classes and have everything else kind of come into play there. But for me, it's so helpful to kind of build it that way, because then I can build them in the world. They have buy-in and actually will care. So they're not a bunch of murder hobos running around the map just doing chaos. They're going to actually care about what's going on. And again, just keeping that line of communication. My players have a private chat that I am not a part of because they are very concerned that I'm going to take whatever they say in our chat and use it against them. So I know they have their own chat. They don't know that I know this, but I know they do because someone let it slip. But I think the session zeros are just so important. And it's not one that you should just have at the beginning of the campaign. It should be happening in the kind of the mid-level or in between. And then as you're nearing the end point, because with that, you are setting the stage for how this campaign is going to end. Whether it be that everything is going to be tied up just temporarily and you're going to visit it later on, maybe down the road, or these are characters that could very well, depending upon the outcome of the game, be sunsetting these characters that they've explored for however amount of time, whether it be a few weeks, a few months, or a couple of years. So you want to make sure that the proper time and attention goes into that when you're having these session zeros. And that's why I kind of like the session zeros, because you can have as many session zeros as you need.
Yeah, I've only recently kind of learned of this session 0.5, these kind of, session zeros that take place, mid campaign or closer to the end. I haven't used any of them yet. I haven't implemented any of that in any of the campaigns that I've run just yet. But I've been using session zeros for a few years now. And I will never not use a session zero for a campaign again. I don't use them for one shots. I don't think they're necessary for a one shot, as long as there's a group chat about, like who's creating what characters and when we're going to meet and play and all that kind of stuff. To me, a session zero is a little overkill for a 3 or 4 hour one shot. But for a campaign, it's absolutely imperative as far as I'm concerned. I think, you hear people talk about the pillars of, a setting or pillars of a story or campaign. And those are crucial things to have, but a pillar has to stand on a foundation.
Exactly.
And to me, the session zero is the foundation. That's the bottommost structural load bearing feature of a campaign. That's where people, like you said, are able to tell you the pitfalls they want to avoid, the topics they don't want to talk about, the things that they don't want to mention. It's where the connections between the characters can start to form. And maybe even more importantly, the connections between the players.
Exactly.
People feel out, because just like there's a party dynamic of, I'm the tank, I'm the DPS, I'm the, whatever. There's also a table dynamic.
Yes.
How a group of players operates. We talked about the Dawnbringers earlier. There's a chemistry with any group of people, with any table, and you have to find where you fit in that group of people. Are you the class clown? Are you the tactician? Are you the note taker? Are you, what role are you going to be filling at the table? And people kind of fall into these naturally, usually. But I think it's a very crucial thing to be aware of.
Yes.
What role you're supposed to be kind of doing with the group. And the session zero is one of the best ways to figure that out. One, it's usually the first time that you're all kind of together as a group with this singular purpose in mind. But also, you're not having to worry about advancing the story, what the next objective is that you need to be completing, making sure that you've picked your spells. All of that is on the shelf for the moment.
Yeah.
And you're just there to kind of get your hands dirty, if you will, kind of start this process, and kind of put your handprint on it. It's kind of your first chance to kind of really take ownership of what is going to transpire. From then on.
No, we just wrapped, as I mentioned before, Pawns of Prometheus. And so Bill, when he was kind of teasing this in our session zero, is that it would, yes, there'd be adventure, but it's very much a political intrigue, which interests all of us immediately, because we had just wrapped up a very adventure-based, high fantasy campaign. So political intrigue immediately. All of us were very intrigued by this. But what ended up happening is we all built it up like very suspicious asshole characters with that along with it. So the dynamic of the party, having that. So in our first season for, it was called Geek Attack, and Brett was running that. Our group fit together like a glove, no problem. We had maybe a couple of conflicts, but honestly, it was building moments between all of that. With this campaign, Duval and I, for instance, hi Jacob, his and I, our characters usually, whenever we're in a campaign together, get along. Our characters hated each other in this campaign. Hated each other. We literally, I remember there was a whole, and it was because his character was like, no, we're having this conversation now. We were on top of a mountain and we're trying to get to the top to figure out what might be going on in Sansa Pass. And his character was saying, no, we're going to have this conversation now. And so I was like, okay, here we go. So meanwhile, our characters are yelling at each other and having this conversation. We're checking in with each other the whole time. I'm messaging him like, oh my God, I can't believe she just said that to you. I love you. I'm so sorry. Checking in with each other constantly. We're checking in with the group because we're making sure the group is comfortable. Yeah, like they're like, oh God, mom and dad are fighting. Like this is bad. We were just in it, and our characters were just in their emotions. And literally, this was a group that came together. This group came together because we have a common goal, and that was it. There was no, and we had to keep reminding ourselves, because as much as we're all best friends, our group has only known each other for like a week. So we have a lot of learning to do in that time span. We have a lot of secrets that haven't been told. And for my character, for instance, so I'm playing Oriana Nero, or as she reveals later, Oriana Fiammata Arsde Medanari. She's the last of her family. Her noble family got killed off. And so she, much of the world doesn't know that she even exists because she lived in a basement. Her parents were terrified that she would be used against whatever because their nobility and emotions and all that. So she hid in the back of a theater, and so she became a bard, but she's not the bard that inspires. I literally did 2 inspirations the entire campaign, and it was for the big bad fight at the end of season 1. She's more of a College of Whispers. She uses secrets against. Whereas Jacob was playing a fighter that kind of idolized the adventuring lifestyle and just was doing stuff. So our group quickly came into line of, okay, I'm going to be the one that's researching all of this stuff because I'm usually taking notes anyways. But Oriana, being the bard, she's going to want all that knowledge anyways. So she became that kind of sense. Sort of strategist, not really that great. Olabar was the heavy hitter. Ramed, who was played by Smitty, was our monk, so he could stun anything. And then we had Victor, who I think he was a bit of comic relief, but also a little bit of that backup fighting as well. But we all kind of figured out a group dynamic, and even though it was very tensious at times, we still came together and worked as a group as best as we could given the circumstances. When we were all like on point with each other, we were great. But when we hated each other, we hated each other. So
I think
yeah.
Antagonistic relationships in an RPG are some of the best things to have in a group. A group being completely hunky-dory with each other is great, but it can only take you so far. We play these games that are built on conflict and conflict resolution. That's the whole purpose to playing role-playing games, is to be challenged and then to overcome that challenge. It's a cathartic, experience. But without conflict, you can't have conflict resolution. And so even inter-party conflict is okay, as long as, like you pointed out, it's not player conflict.
No.
Player conflict is not okay. That has to be rectified immediately. But character conflict, inter-party conflict is fantastic. There's a person, a good friend of mine that I get to play with quite a bit. His name is Chad Nick. Every game that we are in together, our characters end up butting heads with one another. But it's always in a brotherly kind of way. It's, I'm going to give you a ton of shit, but when you need me, I'm there.
Yeah.
And it's always so much fun because I understand as a player, he's not taking any of it personal. And he's going to give as good as I do. So I love playing that that interaction at
Yeah.
the table. There's almost always somebody that I'll latch on to. I think they can handle this, and I'll start digging on them. But yeah, Talmud and Talmud and Cantriel in the Dawnbringers
Yes.
is another prime example of that. We have a very love-hate relationship, which is awesome to play.
Definitely.
Cool. One of the questions that I had from a friend of mine named Karen Davies is, how, as a GM, do you manage your own expectations for a campaign? Because as a collaborative game, it tends to take on a life of its own.
So luckily, having run a campaign that doesn't meet all the time, I have a lot of time to kind of reflect on how I want to change things and what my expectations were. Because I'll be honest, this is the first full-fledged campaign I've run. So I definitely had a lot to learn. I had everything mapped out in the beginning. I had, very clear ideas of what points we would hit. Now, my note taking, I honestly just had to do a deep dive the other day, and I went back to my notes all the way back from 2019. And looking at how written out everything was to how things are now. I'll have paragraphs and then I'll have some bullet points, but things are a lot more relaxed when it comes to that. I have a basic idea. I didn't map out the entire campaign. I used to map out my sessions. I have general points and things, but I don't ever know what my players are going to want to do. I think I hit my breaking point when we had one session. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to do this like heist thing. We're going to like go into the mansion. They're not going to know we're there. So I planned like 5 different ways that they would be doing this, because they were going to work with another organization and kind of be shadowing with them as like interns. And so I had that all mapped out, all ready to go. We get to the episode though. No, we want to go to the cemetery. I'm like, okay. I understand why, and luckily I had threads that were already there because they need to go to the cemetery anyways. So I was able to shift kind of focus to there, but I had to very quickly kind of improv on the fly in terms of getting that prepared. So kind of managing my expectations when it comes to that. My biggest thing as a GM, but also as a player, that I sometimes grapple with is the idea that everyone has their characters kind of figured out. To me, I tend to latch on and can pick up pretty quickly about, okay, Duval's playing Olabar. Okay, he's very fighty and he's a bit of a fireball. Okay, that's his thing. I can kind of understand his motives and what he's doing. If I don't understand a player's motives or the character's motives, it's very frustrating for me as a GM, but also as a player, because then I don't know what they're trying to necessarily do. Not saying I need to know your backstory, bro, but kind of that expectation of what you're trying to do, what you're bringing to the party, that kind of idea. So I've done it before. I will ask questions in and out of character, like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I'm not saying come to session 0, session 1 with that fully fledged out, but if I'm seeing over the course of the campaign that it feels like maybe someone's just doing something because they, don't know, and I don't know what their motives may be, and I haven't been seeing any threads, I can get kind of frustrated with that. And to me, it's a lack of communication on that point, because we're not getting that kind of growth of what the insight of that character is or what the player may be thinking. But in terms of managing my own expectations when it comes to that, I have kind of basic ideas. I have a ton of binders for the campaign and for the world and all of that. What they decide to do is literally going to change like the wind when it comes to that. And I think I'm okay with that. I wasn't in the beginning, but that was because I think when you're watching shows such as like D4 or you're something like Dawnbringers or something like that, everybody has it so together. So, or Critical Role even has it so together. So you want to, as a DM, kind of rise to that expectation. And I think that's really unfair because everybody's DM style is so different. Everybody's game is going to be vastly different. There are never going to be two Critical Roles. There are never going to be two Dawnbringer games. And that's okay. That's fine. That is totally fine. There is no, like, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. So that expectation of you have to, okay, I need to have the visuals, I need to have the music, and I need to have everything kind of mapped out and ready to go and look like I have it together. No, most of the time it's a lot of faking it and then just taking very copious notes. I record some of my sessions too, so that way I can go back. Because for me, I have a list of like names ready to go or NPCs that they may encounter, but I never know what they're going to do. But I'm okay with that. And they're taking the campaign in their own time. Sure, by now I was expecting them to be, sailing on the ocean, but they really wanted to explore the town and they grew to really like the town. They've been staying in it and they have a home there now. They have a shop now and they are very much ingrained in that. And I think being okay with what other people want to do, remembering that this is a collaborative piece. This is, yes, you are, as the DM, you are the foundation, but you're also setting the stage. It is up to your players to run with that. And the fact that they are changing and going against things means that they are so inspired by what you were putting into this world that they are running with it. And I think that is, again, another expectation that, can be very misleading sometimes too.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to have a pretty clear idea for kind of where I want my stories to eventually end up. And so for me, a lot of what I do is taking what they've done, taking what they've shown that they're interested in, and trying to figure out a way that both of those things can still happen and still be true. So yes, they're going to go over to, the different town. I hadn't really planned on them going over to this other town, but that's fine. What is going to happen is still going to happen. Just now this has context on how they're going to get there or why, or it might change something, but ultimately it's kind of still the same spirit of what I was going for in the first place. Because one of the things that I like to do is to pepper in things that at the end they're able to look back on, reflect on, and go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I understand why that happened, 14 sessions ago or whatever. And I can say, ha ha ha, yes, now I get to reveal the big secret. And I love the fact that when people have that dawning realization and they connect the dots in their brain, that's the best thing for me as a storyteller. So I like having a through line kind of in mind as I'm going, but I absolutely need and want that input from the players to kind of color everything and shape things. One of the best ways that I've heard it described before, the method that I like to use, is almost like I come to the table with a certain amount of wet clay, and I want everybody's hands on this clay, pushing it and shaping it and changing it and taking parts away. And I might kind of say, okay, well, we've already got this kind of thing working this way. Let's kind of push that way. Is build on that a little bit. I kind of, there is almost more like a guide. But yeah, collaborative is 100% the way to go in almost any creative endeavor, honestly.
Question for you, actually.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I think that oftentimes the expectation is that the GM is going to give the synopsis of what happened last time. Do you have one of your players give the synopsis of what happened, or does it fall solely on your shoulders to do?
So I'm horrible about doing recaps at the beginning of my sessions. I really am. I usually I have so much planned for like what I want to get to in a session. A lot of times that time budget is usually a bigger worry and a bigger concern of mine. So I usually have like an introduction paragraph that is more kind of it kind of sets where I want the tone to be for the session.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's going to be dealing with, a loss that we found out that one of the characters had, and it kind of is going to be a little bit of a grief heavy episode, then the intro that I'm going to give is going to kind of touch on grief and like kind of the way that it can affect us. But I use that as a way to kind of signal to my players, hey, this is kind of what we're going to be covering in the session. This is kind of where I want this to be tonally. And it also typically is the switch between meta and in-game.
Mm-hmm.
And then following that introduction, usually I'll give a very brief, like, this is where we are. This is what's just happened. What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of situation. And most of the time, players seem to fall back into step where we were. And I'm also the kind of dungeon master that if you have that kind of a question, like I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the fort, like just ask me. That's fine. Like I don't mind breaking immersion just to answer a simple question like that at all.
No, that makes sense. No, I was just curious. So for mine, at least, since we meet so infrequently, I actually have my players write up the previously on, they're called the axe holes because they all use axes. I kid you not. So they have a theme song. The bard came up with a theme song that he plays on occasion. But they will, it usually switches off, but they'll, put a synopsis in. I like this idea because Brett does it, Tango. He will do it in the point of view of his character, of what happened. So that allows me, since we do, sometimes there are, especially since everyone gets busy, we have sometimes months that will go past and then, okay, we're trying to remember the lore that happened in the campaign. That allows me to, okay, they got this. I can back off this point a little bit more. Okay, they didn't quite get that, so I might need to lean on that just a little bit more so that they can get it. Or sometimes they'll offer insight in how their character is feeling. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll have his mom give him a ring or something like that. Doing that, I think, helps immensely. And then that opens it up then to answering their questions, as you mentioned, if they're trying to remember different things or remember names. I never have to worry about my party remembering names because they always make fun of the names I make up. So that's always a thing.
That's pretty standard.
It's pretty, like Belsarion, who was the big bad for Arc 1, quickly became Celery Man and then Broccoli Man. And it didn't help he was a plant necromancer, so that just literally made it about 1,000,000 times worse.
Yeah, a GM of mine made the mistake of naming a notorious giant that we were going to face at some point, Blackbone.
Oh no!
And
oh no!
we never went to go face this guy because of the torment that we put this poor guy through over this name. Every time he said it, we were like, and he was just like, you know what? We're just going to scrub that part.
He changed his name to
right.
Sideshow Bob. I don't know. No, but doing that.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. By doing that, I think helps to kind of check in again, kind of helping with that, managing the expectation of, okay, this is what the players are connecting with. This is not what they are. But also kind of giving an idea of how to transition. Okay, so I've answered this question. All right. And so now as we are entering into the point of view of the axe holes, setting it's a nice little transition into, especially if you haven't met for a little bit, a nice way to kind of bring it in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done the having the players do the recap before, usually with my home group. And it is a very effective tool because, like you said, it gives you insight as a dungeon master of what has become important to them, what stood out, what didn't. And it's always fascinating to hear the story. The way that you have it in your mind is one way, but hearing it from someone else's point of view, you're kind of like, oh, okay. And it leads you to draw different conclusions, and you can start to to infer a lot of where they might already be as far as their thoughts on something. Which, as a dungeon master, and you mentioned something about studying psychology, I'm sure that you've already made this correlation that a large percentage of your job as a dungeon master is psychology.
Yes.
Is figuring out what people's trigger's not the right word. What their levers are.
Yes.
You know, how do I get, so and so to rush into action? How do I get them to do that? And understanding that is a it's almost like a cheat for a DM. If you can figure that out, it's
yeah, and I think that's so tied to one, the backstories that they have, but also like players listen. Yes, sometimes I may just be randomly scribbling on a piece of paper while you all are having intense chats because I want to make it look intimidating. I may just be rolling a d20 because I feel like it. But most of the time I'm taking notes and I'm letting you, because that's how like Bill's backstory, he built it literally. He just, one of the other players asked him about his story and he built it at the table. And so I was like, he didn't give me any of this. Oh God. And I had to start like scribbling down notes and then his backstory ended up changing anyway. So we had to kind of retcon things around to fix it. But again, just kind of checking in with everyone, getting an idea where everyone's head is at. Too, but also the synopsis with that, it can be helpful because, again, you as a DM, everything's crystal clear to you and what's going on. Them trying to figure it out, you can then see from their points of view if there are cracks in what you might think is a very strong foundation. So that gives you time to, that doesn't make sense. I need to go back and fix that or something like that to kind of make it make sense.
Absolutely. And on a related note, I will give everyone out there who might be listening or watching this the biggest piece of advice that I can think of. Subtlety sucks.
Yep.
If you think you're being subtle, then your players are not catching it. You have to be more obvious than you think you should in order for people to pick up on it. And an addendum to that is if you have a secret, there has to be a reveal. Yes. Otherwise, the secret's garbage. Mm-hmm. So,
if I can interject with that, just because Duval had the biggest actually secret of this. So again, our characters hated each other for pawns. And there was a moment where she had this jacket that she wore and it got destroyed in a dungeon. She got, I think we were going, a fire elemental, and that thing just attacked. We were level 5. So that was a little difficult. But her jacket got destroyed. And it was because of Duval's character in her mind. So she was very mad because he rushed in and so she had to cover his butt. So she was pissed. And so he got her a new jacket. And so unbeknownst to me for the entire rest of the campaign, up until the last episode of season 1, there was apparently a note in her jacket. Only reason this got revealed is because his character died. So one of his very last messages he told another player, a character in the party, was tell her. And so I opened up the jacket and there was a note that said, and there will be friendship. And I was like, dang it. Now I have to go and get you resurrected because now this is a whole thing. Okay. That was like such a brilliant moment. It was subtle because like Bill would message me every so often and be like, okay, you hear like a slight rustling in your jacket. And I'm like, all right, well, she's wearing a bunch of stuff and she's a girl. So she's got some accessories. So like, that's probably like the rustling noise, or like maybe it's a script from a show she did. Okay. And then it turned out to be that. Yeah, that made me burst into tears on screen. And then Duval started crying. Those moments are brilliant to have. But yeah, subtlety. You may think you're being subtle. Your players are not going to get it. You could be waving a red flag. They won't get it. My campaign on Wednesday nights, they've already met the big bad. They have no idea. They've already met.
There was a saying that my director in college used, or my theater director. It was the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. Because your audience is not quite as intelligent as you're hoping that they are whenever it comes to figuring out things like this, secrets, things that are in your mind very obvious, because you can see the whole web that you've weaved, but they can't. So,
yeah.
We have another question from Aladria. What's one flub as a game runner that you have learned a valuable lesson from?
I think for me, and this was more so from when I first started out DMing, the buy-in, because I had a mini campaign before I started the Wednesday night one, and they were very quickly murder hobos, and it was very frustrating for me to try and get them to kind of care about the world. But then I realized later on I wasn't giving them enough. I wasn't giving them something to care about, so they were doing the murder hobo stuff because they could. And I also realized at that point that as a DM during that campaign, while I was rooting for them, I was also, not necessarily rolling and flipping the dice, but I was altering things in their favor because I wanted them to progress, because I wanted the story to continue. Now with the Wednesday night group that I have, no, how the dice rolls is how it's going to go. I'm rooting for you, but I'm not going to take it easy on you either. And we've had a couple of very close calls with that. But biggest flub is definitely that. I think that just the expectation and flub that I put on my shoulders, but also my players' shoulders, and that's not necessarily fair, because as a DM, I was getting very frustrated with them. Well, I wasn't giving them enough to really care about, so they were giving. Their reactions were what I was giving them, which was not enough. And that was a harder kind of lesson to learn, because as a storyteller, you think you're doing it. No, we got to do more. So that would be the biggest flub that I can think of as least right now. I'm sure another will come at me later.
Well, I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the beast, as a creator, being a creative person, an artist, performer, whatever you want to call it. Your technique, your skill grows with you, and growth only happens with failure. So, making flubs is a natural thing. Learning from them is the next step that some people don't make it to. So admitting that there's a mistake and then growing past it, that's the thing that is crucial. For me, I think one flub as a game runner that I've learned a valuable lesson from is to not entertain rules arguments. If there's a rules argument, I hear you. We're going to discuss it after the session. We're not going to take the time to do that right now. Plain and simple. And if you can't respect that, then you need to leave, and we'll talk about it later. Because I'm not going to waste everybody else's time arguing over some bullshit minutia rule. If you don't trust me enough to run the game the way I think it needs to be run, then this is never going to work in the first place.
Yeah. No, I think that's very fair. I've been very fortunate that the games that I've run so far, I'll ask, because again, I usually don't know all the rules. I don't. But I'll ask what the rule is, and then I'll be like, well, okay, well, I kind of want this to happen, so we'll meet with a compromise, or I get that's the rule, but I don't think that works in this situation, so we're not going to do that. Or, okay, that's the rule. I actually agree with that. Okay, let's do it. But having that conversation, if it's a quick one, like, okay, this is the rule. Okay, yeah, no. And then I can offer up clarification after the game. Sure. Oh my gosh, I will always make time to meet with my players to talk about if there is something that, again, having that decompress, that TLC kind of after post session, I think is incredibly important too, because you can talk about that then. Like, okay, well, this is my rolling. All right, I've taken a little bit more time. In the future, we're going to do this, but the rule still stands for that session.
And just like Jacob said in the chat, a counter argument is fine. Like, bring it to my attention, absolutely, because I'm going to make a mistake eventually. That's just what happens. Most of the time when I'm running a game, I have so many things going on at once that sometimes I just make a snap call, and that's not what's in the book. And if it impacts your character's functionality, then yes, I understand that that's an important thing for you, and bring it to my attention. I will try to do my best to consider it in the moment and then make a judgment call and hopefully reach a good understanding between us. But that person has to understand that I have all these other things going on, and those aren't going to stop getting my attention just so that I can go back and forth about why your ready to action shouldn't use your reaction on your turn or whatever.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to keep the pace of the game going and to keep everybody else's investment up. But absolutely, I will consider it, and I will definitely take it under advisement if you disagree. But we're not going to dwell on it. That's for sure.
Definitely not.
Ain't nobody got time for that shit.
Ain't nobody got time
all right.
For
that. Okay. So I have 2 more talking points.
Okay.
The first of which is a lot of what we've been discussing is about managing expectations as a game master in particular. Well, what tips or tricks, techniques, whatever, would you recommend for managing your expectations as a player?
Again, another kind of important conversation. Again, I think it goes back to the lifeblood that we talked about, communication. And I know at least for Prometheus, there were several conversations that our group was having together, but also our group was having separately with Bill, who was our DM, about what we were thinking in terms of our characters. He was doing check-ins with us because this was a regular every week campaign. So, where our characters were at, where our headspaces were at, what we were thinking when it comes to that. So again, I think it goes back to just that communication. If you are not happy with something, and I remember there was a session that we had, I can't remember which campaign. Honestly, this is the problem of being in a couple different games. There was a campaign where it was a bit of a slog of dungeon rooms. And it just felt like we were just moving from this room to this room. And there wasn't really like an exact point to it. There wasn't a reason really. So we talked after the session because we were like, okay, like it was a great dungeon. Like it was a gorgeous dungeon, but it felt like a little bit of a slog because we're like, all right, and we moved to the next room or something like that. And it didn't feel like really the story was getting anywhere. At that point, a lot of the RP heavy moments were done. So we were just trying to get to the goal in the dungeon and then move on. So we spoke to the DM about it, and we're like, yeah, we like the dungeons, but like maybe like make it tiny or only put us, move the rooms around as a DM. You can do that. So you can have us go into a specific space or go away from that specific space. But it all goes back to the, talking to the other players, but also to the DM. Because I think so often it's that mindset of it's the DM versus the players. And if you're unhappy with something, and I've come across and I have walked away from a couple of campaigns that I've been unhappy with because of the DM or whatever, it just didn't work out. But I talked to the DM each time. We had several meetings. And then after that, if just things, okay, like you're looking for something that's more combat heavy and base, and that's not necessarily what I want to do. I want something that's a little bit more RP with, with that combat. Okay, that's my expectation and what I want to do. This may not be the campaign for me. I've had so much fun playing with you, but I'm going to move on to the next one. Or I will finish up what we're at here and then find an exit at that point. But I think honestly, it comes down to communication, because with that, it's not fair to the DM. because they are so busy managing an entire fantasy world, as well as a main arc, as well as backstories and character arcs for all of the player characters. Plus, also making sure there's a safe space for all. It's not fair to the DM to just kind of gabber about how unhappy you are and then just quit, the campaign without giving some kind of feedback. Give the DM an opportunity. More likely than not, they have no idea. And once you bring it to their attention, then they have the opportunity to fix it. If after that point they're not fixing it and they're not doing that, then okay. Or if it's reached a point that you are ever uncomfortable, go. But you got to talk to the DM, even if the DM is someone that you're uncomfortable with. In that case, you talk to your other party members about that. And that could be an expectation as well, too. But it all comes back to communication and making sure that that line is completely open in terms of how long the campaign's going to run or where we're going. If this is going to be every week or bi-weekly or once a month, that kind of thing. So all comes back, very long-winded way to say communication.
I'm here for it. I think, again, communication is pivotal.
Mm-hmm.
I run a campaign here on the channel that is approaching the 3rd year mark. And what I had as like my several bulleted points for the quests, that they're supposed to be doing, they're just about to complete the first one. And none of the rest of them have even been touched on.
Mm-hmm.
But they know that. And it's a point of joking between us. And it's gotten to the point where I'm like, as long as you are all still happy with the pace of the story and you're not getting bored of these characters or the setting or anything like that, then that's fine. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we'll get to these things eventually. And if you guys are okay, then we're just going to keep going the way that we've been going for however long it's going to take. Now, you don't always have that luxury. Sometimes, it's a finite amount of time that you have before somebody has to move across the world or before somebody starts a new job or has a kid or, any of the other myriad of things. Yeah. Yeah. When life rears its ugly head in your gaming schedule. No, I'm kidding. Real life always has to come first.
Yes.
It demands it, even if you don't want it. So the last talking point that I have is there are times when there is a juxtaposition at the table, whether there's two people, where there are two people that are out of step with one another in regard to their understanding or their expectations of a scene, a session, a game. It could be just mere miscommunication, like in a description or something, or it could be a disagreement with what the plan was supposed to be whenever they get to the moment where it's supposed to happen. How do you manage differing expectations when they're at odds with one another, kind of in the moment that happens?
So I think an important clarification is see if this is happening in character or out of character, just because that can sometimes happen in character where, again,
very true.
I know I talk about it, but Ponce Prometheus, we were trying to jump a crime lord. And I thought we all had a very clear plan in mind of we're going to kidnap this guy and then interrogate him for information. No, apparently we were just going to kill him. So my expectation was vastly different than everybody else's, but that played out in real time. And so that was a conversation after killing the guy and then running for our lives and then having a conversation while hiding that our group had. And then post stream or post session, our group chatted because I was upset, a little bit upset in that regard, because my backstory was a little bit tied to that, and now that I'm gonna wait longer for answers that I could have gotten then. But I realized, thinking back, I didn't make my expectations perfectly clear because of the way that my character is. She doesn't divulge information unless she has to. So I could have been clearer. So it was kind of a check-in on myself in terms of an expectation. Okay, maybe I need to be a little less, we talk about subtlety, little less subtle with what I want to have happen here. But I should have communicated that with the group and also in character as well. But I think talking about it is important, and kind of creating that basis. Certainly, especially when you're playing these games online, depending upon what you're doing, whether it is, and I'm sorry, my camera is just having a fit tonight. When it comes to a lot of the gameplays, that they use theater of the mind, or they'll use maps or something to that effect. And I think often with theater in mind, there's a lot of confusion that happens with, okay, where everything is and what's going on. So I think in terms of as a player and as a DM, being more flexible when it comes to that. Or, if you don't feel comfortable using maps, aka me, I have dry erase boards that I will sometimes just stick their minis on to kind of give them an idea. Or we use Roll20. I use that as a time for them because, hello, we talk about psychology. They doodle the entire time, but they'll sometimes draw the map out there in terms of what they see. And so it's interesting from my point of view. When I'm describing my head, it looks completely different than what they're seeing. So then that helps me kind of see, okay, how do I want to have this going forward? And they prefer that method, so they can draw it out and then make a dungeon look like something else. So, it kind of creates that hilarity, but at the same time, it also creates that context of, okay, there's a clarification. There was an entire session I had with one of my players, Bill, because he gets very in the story, but then he loses a lot of context sometimes. So I had to basically re-walk him through the dungeon of where everything was and kind of lay all that out. And that helped him out immensely when it came to that, just to kind of create clarity. Or if there was something that was unsure about a scene, my players can call timeout and we'll talk about it real quick. Like, this is what actually happened for clarification. They will call for timeout. We'll talk about it. We'll take as much time as we need to make sure everybody's good to go. Or, and usually I do this anyways, I will write a little chapter in their actual story and send it to them in terms of what happened. And it'll be like a little mini chapter of what it did, and with little images to kind of lay everything out a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are times, as far as like a juxtaposition of expectation, where there needs to be a focusing of the narrative vision, if you will, and I think that falls on the GM. I think the GM needs to be that unifying voice. Creative collaboration is absolutely the driving force behind RPGs. It's the purpose, the point. But just like having a director on a movie set, there has to be someone that has the final say. And that onus is on the GM. And I think that needs to be clear whenever you come to the table, that if you're coming as a player, that you are resigning that fact, that you're saying, okay, I'm at your table. This is your game. This is our game. We're going to all put our fingerprints on this. We're all going to give our input, but we're trusting your direction, your vision for this whole project to come together in the end. So when there is that juxtaposition, if a compromise between the two different opposing sides can't be reached very quickly, then I think both sides need to turn and look at the dungeon master and say, okay, what are we going to do? And then the dungeon master needs to make a snap decision, hopefully one that appeases everyone, and then move forward.
Or appeases the most amount of people, and then
exactly,
which is what happened with pawns. I mean, we had to move on. I mean, literally, we were being chased. We had to move on. So, but we talked about it, and it became a point of not only contention for the group to kind of grow upon, it kind of became a point for, in this case, Duval's character to kind of reflect on, oh, I was a bit of a firecracker, and it actually made someone mad at me. Okay, I need to rethink this and not be the, superhero that's doing everything on my own. No, my actions have ripple effects. Yeah, I think again, conflict, I think if used correctly, can be amazing in a game.
Yeah, again, to reiterate, these games are about conflict and overcoming conflict. That storytelling in general is only as interesting as the conflicts that are happening within, because the conquering of those conflicts, it is what gives the catalyst for a character to grow and to change. And the only characters in a story that are ultimately interesting are the ones who go through a change from beginning to end. So don't be afraid of conflict. If it happens, embrace it, but understand that you need to reach a resolution for that conflict so that you can then move on. And I think if you can handle it in game, then that's fantastic, because again, that leads to real conversations between characters. It's, hey, this is what I was wanting. My motivation is this, and you just took that away from me.
Yeah.
We need to talk about this. And that gives a fantastic role-playing scene, because you have someone who has their core threatened, and that's going to bring very real investment from a player. And if the other player can match that energy in the scene, then you're going to have one of those fantastic role-play moments where at the end, both people sit back and go, holy shit.
Yeah.
That was incredible. I need a cigarette. So, and ultimately, again, that's kind of what we're chasing when we sit down. Those moments that we're going to remember for 10 years after the fact and still be talking about. Oh, you remember that time that you chewed my ass out because of that thing that happened? And oh man, you were so mad. But it stays at the table. Don't ever let what happens in your character's sphere affect you so much that you take it away from the table with you.
Yeah.
That's not healthy.
No. But I think the biggest takeaway from this, with managing expectations, to kind of bring it all back around, because it's an ongoing, kind of like with your campaigns that you're building, the characters that you're playing, they're going to grow, they're going to change, and that's okay. It's an ongoing process, and it's going to change as you become more comfortable as a DM and as you become as a player. But I think the most important things are communication and making sure that that line is open between you and your other players, you and the DM when it comes to that, as well as just making sure that everyone's having fun, that those pillars and the foundation is in place. And also realizing that, again, it goes back to the sculpture. You all are putting your hands on the sculpture. It's going to change direction. It's going to change shape many times. That's okay. There is nothing wrong with that. And you shouldn't feel like, okay, I've done my session 0 and all that at the beginning, I don't need to do anything else. No, this is something you will be carrying through until the end. And then when you start another campaign.
Yeah, very true. I think that's why it's important to refer to it as managing. It's in the present tense. You're managing expectations. It's an ongoing thing. And it is a part of your job as a game master. And I would even argue that it's a part of your job. It's a part of your social contract as a player in the game.
Yes.
As well, to maintain these expectations, your own and the other people in the game. But yeah, this has been fantastic. It's been a great conversation, and I really sincerely appreciate you agreeing to come on and discuss this with me today, Jordan.
It's been an absolute blast. I know we went long, but
no.
I was having a ton of fun. I didn't want this to end, so
no. I don't have a fixed time for what these are, so I'm perfectly happy to chat until we're done. So. Why don't you once again kind of plug anything that you'd like to plug, tell people where they can find you, and then we're going to put a bow on it and call it a night.
That sounds great. Again, thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for all of those questions. They were fantastic. I love answering those questions. You can find me in most spaces online at DND Jordan Lea. Again, I stream on my own channel, twitch.tv/DND Jordan Lea. I have to fight the urge to dab every time because Jacob and the group all do dabs when that happens. So, but I normally play Dead by Daylight and talk about TTRPGs and how a lot of the survivors and the killers in the game are actually kind of relatable to D&D. So that's pretty fun. I also play Classic WoW with the amazing Goblin Katie. Starting Monday, May 17th, you will find me on Mini Terrain Domain for Scribes and Scrolls. I'm very excited. We'll be doing Journey Through Candlekeep. And then on Tuesdays and the occasional Thursdays, you will see me over on the Amphitheater, which I am one of the co-founders along with Jacob and a few others, which is a fantastic space where we talk about everything TTRPG and we play, TTRPGs as well as Dungeons and Dragons and just have a ton of fun. One-shots and campaigns all around. I also do charity streams. So currently right now I'm raising money all year round for Color of Change. And be on the lookout. I'll be putting out some notices soon because I'll be doing another charity stream in July and in November for Color of Change because we should be doing that all year round.
That's awesome. I love gaming for charity. It's one of those rare instances where I get to do what I love anyways, but for a cause.
Mm-hmm.
So like, yeah, it makes my heart very warm.
Expect an invite.
Sure, absolutely.
Expect an invite. Quick, too as well. Also, the first week of May, I will be helping out over on Mini Terrain Domain with production for Jasper's Game Week. So
Yes.
Come hang out, go raise money for charity. So there's going to be some amazing games. I'll be in chat and running production and helping out with the mods and stuff. So come hang out and raise money for charity.
Do it.
Do it.
Thank you again so much. Help Action has been a fantastic venue for me to be able to grow my circle of people that I consider friends or that I feel like I know on a fundamental level. We spend a lot of time gaming with a lot of people, and that's great. It's a lot of fun, but I really like being able to have these kinds of conversations, especially one-on-one. I'm horrible being on a camera by myself. I become very dry, very straightforward and to the point. And in a large group, I tend to withdraw and become very quiet. So having one-on-one conversations is something that I really, really enjoy, especially talking about gaming. And I think it's such an interesting hobby, because there's so many different facets to it, and everybody, like I said before, brings different things to this hobby and takes something different away from this hobby. And it's always so fascinating to be able to delve into that in a little bit more detail than just in passing. So, I appreciate it a ton. Thank you, everybody who has tuned in and watched, whether you watched live with us tonight or whether you may be tuning in at some point in the future. It is deeply appreciated. If you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of these episodes backlogged, and hopefully there will be a lot more going forward. I already have my next guest planned for next month, and the topic that we're going to be talking about. So looking forward to that. As far as what's next on the channel, Sunday I will be hosting the second episode of a game my buddy Chad is running called Mother Knows Best. It is a Harbinger Mecha Hack mashup. Lots of fun. So check that out. Monday, I am using Mecha Hack to run a Mad Max game here on the channel. I'm very excited for that. I think it's going to be a fantastic fit. I've been reading the Mad Max comic.
I'm jealous.
Playing the Mad Max video game. So I'm all in that headspace right now. I think it's going to be fantastic. I can't wait to blow shit up.
Fair.
So, yeah. Thank you, everyone, so much. I love you all. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. And until next time, may your dice roll high and your snacks always be within reach.